What's up, everybody? We're back with another video, and this is actually the first official recording of 2025. With the holidays and everything, and then with the engine going out, I kind of took like a mental break and just been working and chilling, spending time with the family and everything. So haven't really done any car things, and actually been getting caught up on all the content that I recorded at like the end of last year. So a lot of the previous videos, were recorded last year but just got released late. So yeah, but anyways, we're back to working on the LS. So if you saw in the last video, I actually flipped it back around. It was upside down at the end of the last video, but the issue was the rod bearings got chewed up. Like, look at that, they just got cooked and absolutely destroyed. So I didn't show it in the last video because we saw this and was like, oh yeah, that's the problem. But off camera, I dove deeper into the engine to figure out what else was possibly wrong with it. And the main journals on the crank are like slightly chewed up. I think some bearing material got in there and kind of chewed it up a bit. So I actually already got a replacement crankshaft for it. Nothing new, it's nothing special. I didn't go with a stroke or anything like that. It's just an OEM crank from the junkyard, but it is in really good condition. Just need to clean it up. All the journals and everything are in good shape. So I have a new crankshaft. Also have new front and rear seal kits, or front and rear. Yeah, this is front. That's the water pump gasket. So front and rear seal kits. And then I also got new Clevite OEM standard size main bearings and rod bearings. And I also already have ARP hardware all throughout the bottom end of the engine. And then last but not least, to top it off, I got a Melling high pressure oil pump. I'm actually thinking this was the cause of my engine failure in the first place, because when I first rebuilt the engine, I actually put in a high volume oil pump. And when it was a street car, that was fine. But doing research after the engine failed, I see that a lot of people in motorsport applications, especially road racing and drifting, where you're seeing a lot of high RPMs for an extended period of time with high G forces, the high volume pump actually kills engines, because you're sitting at such high RPM for such a long time. The pump is running so much volume of oil that you're basically almost sucking the pan dry. And then if you were to take a right-hander, left-hander, brake hard, accelerate hard, whatever, a hard G, and makes that oil slosh whatever little oil is left in the pan, you're gonna basically starve the pickup tube. And I think that is what caused my engine failure, because like I said, I have the high volume oil pump in the engine. So nothing else really indicates any type of failure. The pickup tube is still in good condition. It didn't pop out. I didn't have a girdle on it, but I am getting a girdle when I put it back together. And so I'm gonna girdle the pickup tube. If you don't know, the LSs use one bolt when there's a space for two. I'll show you that when I actually get to that part. But yeah, nothing else really indicates what like a major point of failure. So I'm just assuming that over a full season of me racing and everything, it's just wear and tear of running a high volume oil pump, and then I guess having low pressures at points throughout the season, and then just slowly but surely wearing away those bearings, and then eventually wearing away the crankshaft. So the crankshaft isn't like destroyed, but it could be fixed, get machined and get fixed. But I just decided against that. I'm like, I'll just go get a new to me OEM one. So that's the plan. So we're gonna go ahead. First plan of attack is we're gonna pop off the valve covers and let the rockers loose, because I'm not taking the heads off when I take the crank out. I'm gonna leave the rods and pistons in the engine, and I'm leaving the heads on, and that's the plan of attack. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so like I said, the first step was to go ahead and pull the rockers loose. And just starting off, I'm gonna say, for anybody that hasn't built an engine, or if you want to try to put something together, personally I'd say the LS is probably one of the easiest engines to rebuild and take apart. Everything is really simple, as long as you take your time and pay attention to what you're doing and make sure things are just oriented the right way when you put it back together. That's really all it is to it. There's no, gimmicks with it like there is a lot of these other engines. So yeah, back to what I was saying. So we pulled the rockers loose, pulled out the push rods and the rockers, and then flipped the engine over. And then we went ahead and got all of the rod bolts taken out on all 8 rods. So wanted to go ahead and remove all the rod bolts before we took care of the main caps. So after we got that, we moved on and started taking care of the crank pulley, and we got the front timing cover off. And then it was just quick and simple to remove the oil pump, and then once you get that off, it's really, really easy. You'll see how easy it is to undo the timing on LS. So easy. Alright, what's up everybody? It's the next day. I called it quits last night because it got late. It was like 10:30 and I was like super hungry and getting tired. I had to go to work the next day. But we're back again. I called it quits last night because the only thing holding the crank in was the front main cap. The side bolts were still bolted in, and that was because the alternator was in the way and the AC compressor was in the way. But I went ahead and removed those off camera, and so now I'm gonna go ahead and break loose the 2 side bolts for the main cap and then remove this main cap, and we'll be able to get the crank out of there. Alright, so crank's out. Crank is out. It wasn't too bad, but we just saw like little wear marks here and there. It's just like, I'm not really too safe with running it. And honestly, if it was a street engine, I'd probably just send it. But because I'm planning on racing this car a lot more, I just wanted to be on the safe side. But yeah, let me shine my light. So that's what we're working with. Like I said, I have all new bearings, so I'm gonna go ahead and refresh all the main bearings, put the top side of the rods in, get all of those situated, and then rest the crank back in, and then start piecing everything back together. But I am gonna leave this like this for right now because it's my dog's birthday, both my dogs. So we got some cakes and stuff, so we're gonna go down there and sing them happy birthday. For some people that might be stupid, but I love my dogs. My dogs are, people probably hate when people say this too, but they're like my kids. So I'm gonna go and take care of them and have some fun with them, and yeah, we'll come back up here and get back to work. All right, so like I said earlier, as long as you pay attention, you'll be all right. The block has grooves to the main bearings to sit in, and the main bearing has a groove that allows it to basically lock into the block, and it's the same thing with the caps. So you do that, and as long as that's okay, you'll be good to go, and make sure that the bearing is even on both sides. So I went ahead and installed the main bearings, and then worked our way down to install all 8 of the rod bearings. And now with everything installed, we're pretty much ready to get the crank in. Alright, and then moving on to installing the crank. This was actually pretty straightforward and easy too, even with the rods and still in the block. You just have to take your time and walk it in and make sure that none of the rods are hitting the journal as you're, resting the crank into place. So we were able to do that, and then got all of the rods up onto the crankshaft. So we just threw on all the rod caps and got them snug. We didn't torque them down or anything, just got them snug so we could rotate the crankshaft and torque them down as necessary moving forward without, anything binding up because they weren't already. All right, so we got the crank in and we got all the rods connected to the crank. We didn't put the main bearings in because we just wanted to make sure that nothing was binding with, we weren't hitting any of the rods on the way in with the crank. So we wanted to be able to like lift up and push down on the crank, as needed. So we were able to do that, got everything in. But we did notice the engine this is a Gen 3 engine, and it was originally a 24 tooth reluctor wheel on the crank, and this is a 58 tooth. But I did the necessary research, and it is possible to use the 58 tooth in a Gen 3 block. Because I'm running the Harley, they have a box that if you were running the factory ECM that you could use and convert to a Gen 4 crankshaft. But because I'm running the Harley, I can just go into the system and choose between a 24 or a 58 tooth. And the only other changes I need to make is to the front cover. I need to convert from reading off the rear camshaft sensor on the top of the block. I need to read off of the front timing cover. And I also need the Gen 4 camshaft gear. I need those 2, and I need my camshaft extension harness to read the camshaft position sensor, and a 58 tooth crank sensor. So the sensor sits in the same spot, it's just a different sensor. So just a couple things. I actually, was checking everything because I was like, is it cheaper to just buy a 24 tooth crank, or is it cheaper to convert everything to just run this crank? And it would be cheaper to just convert everything to run this crank. So that's the route that I'm gonna go, but I won't be able to finish the engine completely tonight the way that I wanted to. So it's snowing up here in Georgia, so probably if the weather clears up tomorrow, I might go down to Summit and get the parts that I need. If not, I might have to wait till the day after tomorrow and run down there, pick up the parts that I need, and then I can go ahead and completely, button up the engine. Minus the trunnion upgrades. I do want to do the trunnion upgrades before I put it back in, and I could do them with the engine in the car, but I want to be able to do it while it's out. It's just a lot easier and a lot more pleasurable for me to just be able to walk around the engine and do what I need to do. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the main caps on and get everything torqued down, and then we'll be back when I get the rest of the parts. So we got the main caps installed and the ARP studs hand snug the way that it says on the installation guide. And then going from there, following the ARP torque spec guide, you're supposed to torque the inside nuts first on the main caps and get all of those torqued down in sequence. And then you follow that up with torquing the outside nuts to spec in sequence, following the same sequence as the inside torque. But the torque specs are different for the inside studs and the outside studs, the nuts on them. So if I remember correctly, the inside studs were torqued to 10 foot-pounds higher than the outside studs, or vice versa. And when I say the studs, not the stud itself, but the nut, because the studs are only supposed to be hand tightened and nothing more than that. And then the last step with torquing down the main caps are the side bolts. I believe these were torqued down to 28 foot-pounds or something like that. Nothing too crazy. And also make sure if you're doing this to install RTV on these side bolts, because if you don't, they will leak oil. And then now moving forward to finish up the bottom end, now that all of the main caps were torqued to spec and everything was finished up, we moved on to torquing down all of the rod bolts, and then this was just pretty simple, just torquing them down as we go, rotating the engine to get to access to the bolts, and that was pretty much it. All right, what's up, everybody? We back again, and we got the parts now. So actually, I don't remember what I last showed you. So I got all the parts. Well, this is the oil pan, the same oil pan. I just cleaned it out. Got it looking nice and spick and span. Got that. Cleaned out the baffle too. Both of it was just filthy. New front cover. Like I said, this is the Gen 4 front cover with the front cam sensor. And then I also installed a new front seal, this seal that I had, because they actually sell the front cover with the seal, but I already had the seal, so I just bought the front cover and installed the seal that I had. And actually, which I think was part of the cause of failure, when we refreshed the engine, and I honestly think it was my fault, we didn't install the windage tray. We didn't install the windage tray when we were putting it together, and I think that was because it didn't fit over the ARP studs. We have that now. The new Gen 4 cam gear with the 4 teeth instead of the 1 from the Gen 3. ARP cam bolts, and then these are the ARP bolts for the windage tray. And then we have the Gen 4 cam sensor, crank sensor, and cam sensor, and also the girdle for the oil pickup tube for just extra insurance. So everything's cleaned up, and now we can start putting everything back together. All right, so moving on to the last few pieces for the bottom end. I got the windage tray and then installed that because that was really the last piece to kind of seal up the bottom end minus the pickup tube. So I went ahead and installed that and installed those ARP bolts. And then moving forward, we went ahead and got it timed up. And as you can see here, it's super easy to time up at LS. It's literally just 2 gears, the cam and the crank, and there's no tensioners or anything. You just make sure that the teeth are lined up on both the cam and the crank, and torque everything down. It's literally that easy. And now with the timing chain on, we can go ahead and install the high pressure oil pump. So I'm excited because this is the piece that I feel like is the solution to the problem, you know, with the high volume pump possibly being the cause of failure. So even though this was just a quick little easy 4 bolts, this felt good to install and know that this is probably the insurance that I needed from the beginning. And now that everything internally on the front of the engine was installed, I went ahead and installed the front timing cover, the new Gen 4 one. But with this one, if you're doing an LS, just don't tighten it all the way. You have to leave it kind of hand tight because the front cover does move around a lot on the bolts and around the front crank. And you're supposed to just get it caught up to where it lines up in place, and then you install the crank pulley first before you tighten it down all the way. That way you can get the front seal centered up around the crank pulley and it doesn't get pinched on the way in. And then now installing the crank pulley, it's a lot easier if you have the tool. If you don't have the tool, I've actually seen a few people with some tricks that they use like a MAP gas torch or just a regular propane torch or something to heat up the pulley itself, and then it will just slide on over the crank. I've seen that method work too. I prefer to use the tool, but you know, whatever works for you and whatever you have available, make it happen. And then with the crank pulley installed, we can go ahead and tighten up the front cover and get that tightened up. And then after that, I can get the engine flipped back over and we can go ahead and install the pickup tube because we have the oil pump installed now and the timing cover installed and everything. And then if you remember, like I showed you earlier, we installed the girdle because OEM, the Chevy only uses one bolt on the pickup tube when you could use two. And there are cases of the pickup tube moving and getting, you know, lodged out of the oil pump and then losing oil pressure like that too. And now with all the major pieces pretty much back together, we can go ahead and start getting it sealed up and all the accessories on. And I do like LS's because it's a minimal RTV engine. You only have to use RTV on the 4 points where the front cover and the rear cover meet the block. And then it's actually a reusable oil pan gasket. So got that installed, got the oil pan installed, and then went around and installed the starter. So real quick. And I also installed the 4th gen crank sensor too. So did all of that, and then moving to the front of the engine, went ahead and installed the water pump, and moving from here, we're pretty much good to go, and it's basically done. All right, so I was editing this video and actually realized that I didn't record an outro. So the engine is completely back together. I did put this header on, but I'm gonna have to take it back off to put the transmission on. I forgot the bell housing for the transmission doesn't fit with the long tubes. So everything is back together. The valve covers aren't on it because there is 2 other things that I need to do to really call it 100% complete. I'm gonna do the Brian Tooley Racing, the BTR rocker arm upgrade. I believe it was from BTR. It was either the BTR or the Texas Speed. I'm not sure which ones, but I'm going to do the rocker arm trunnion upgrade because I haven't done that. And I'm actually lucky that nothing has happened yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before I put it, well, not before I put it back in, but before I start it back up. And the only other thing, I need a new power steering reservoir because when I was pulling the engine, I actually broke the return nipple off. So I have to get a new reservoir. But both of those, the trunnion upgrade and also the power steering reservoir, I could do both of those while they're in the car. So I'm going to go ahead and get the pilot bearing swapped over, and then I could take the engine off the stand and, you know, put the transmission on, well, put the flywheel, clutch, everything, and put the transmission on and go ahead and drop it back in. But I'm going to save that for the next video. I'm not going to do that in this video. So hopefully I'll see y'all next time. In the next video, I will be putting the engine back in and getting the first startup with the refreshed engine. So hope to see y'all for that one. And at the time that I'm recording this update right now is a month out, well, just over a month before the first race of the season. So it's time to get to it and it's time to get to work. So like I said, hope to see y'all next time when we drop the engine in and we start it up. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you later.